Hello, I'm Barbara Berlin. How important is it for Virginia to put a wildlife protection plan into action? Next, we'll find out what's at stake if we don't and what's already being done as some of the state's conservation leaders join me with their perspective. Welcome to Perspective. As development continues to spread away from urban areas, we're losing more than open space. Our fish and wildlife are losing the habitat in which they live. More than 900 species in this state are showing serious decline. But Virginia is not alone in having a problem or searching for a solution. In fact, the federal government has mandated that each state develop conservation strategies if funding is to continue. Before hearing more on the state's action plan, let's see why now is the time to be wild, Virginia.
One, two. Well, I feel like a stranger in my own hometown. There's traffic in the air where there used to be the sound. But the tall trees growing and kids running wild. Oh, maybe I was looking through the eyes of a child.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Young. You know, with the modern life crowding in on us from all directions, we need relief from it now and then. The natural world in all of its simple beauty and incredible diversity offers us just such a sanctuary. If you care enough that you want to help wildlife, but just don't know how, here's some good news. Virginia has a plan which takes into account all of our state's wild animals, not just a few of them. Working together, biologists, sportsmen, conservationists, and members of your community crafted the Virginia Wildlife Action Plan, but we need your participation to make it work. Think you can't make a difference? Well, you can. Be wild and get involved for clean air and clean water. Work together with your government officials to make everyone in Virginia aware that wildlife habitat and remaining natural areas need our help. Join our team.
And joining me now to discuss Virginia's strategy is David Whitehurst, Director of the Wildlife Diversity Division at the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, and John Montgomery, who serves as Chairman of the Board of Game and Inland Fisheries. Welcome, gentlemen. So nice to see you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Let's begin, David, by having you tell us a little bit about what an action plan is and how do you go about putting one together?
That's a very good question because several years ago, none of us had those answers, so we had to search for those pretty quickly. The Wildlife Action Plan really is a conservation strategy. It's looking at all the state's wildlife to determine just what the problems are facing it and what actions need to take place to correct those problems. I liken it to basically going to the doctor, taking your wildlife to the doctor, getting examination, and then writing prescription for what needs to take place to make changes and improve the health of wildlife.
Now, when you started examining this situation, what did you really find?
Well, we found that we have a lot of species in the state that are in serious decline. If you look at it by taxa, well, first of all, it's about 925 species total. But if you look at it by taxa, 25% of our birds, virtually half of our reptiles, half of our amphibians, and almost all of our freshwater mussels are in a state of serious decline, and that's cause for concern.
Was the situation worse than you expected or than anyone had expected?
It was worse than I expected, but first of all, you need to understand this is the first time that anyone's ever looked at all wildlife, and the many thousands of species that we have, it's the first time that we've taken a comprehensive look at it. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's not as surprising as you might think initially.
Mm-hmm. John, were you surprised when you heard about the situation?
Well, I think the most interesting part about it is the fact that there is so much wildlife that is either not threatened or endangered, but yet is in decline. And the way I look at it, and I believe the board as a whole looks at it, is the fact that this is a proactive approach rather than wait until they are threatened or endangered. This is an opportunity for us to use an ounce of prevention, if you will, rather than a pound of cure. It's a whole lot harder, if possible at all, to turn back the clock. However, if we do some things now, and particularly you saw in one of the slides that was one of the graphics that were just shown, the fact that it takes coordination, education, planning, If we do some of that now, the rewards will be much greater for all of us in the future, not just us, but our children as well. Barbara, I will tell you one of the things as I watched the video that we all watched a few minutes ago that struck me the first time I saw it and each time I see it. There's certain scenes in there that I can place myself in. I've been there before. I've seen the ducks on the water, the quail, some of the other scenes, not all of them. I look forward to it, but many of them I have. And what strikes me as the absolute imperative of the situation and the circumstances is that I want my children to have a chance to see those in the future. And if we're going to do that, we have to have something like an action plan, a wildlife action plan. The good news is we have one. It's well done. David and his folks at the department have done a fabulous job. I mean, beyond everyone's expectation. Now, of course, is execution, and we're committed to executing well and getting the job done. So we're very excited about it.
The video is wonderful, by the way, but I'm wondering, do you know how Virginia compares to other states in this area, and do you have to compete for federal dollars with other states?
Well, this particular program, the federal funding that we're getting with this program is a program called State Wildlife Grants Program. It is not competitive. It's based on a formula involving land area and population. So we don't have to compete per se with that. One of the things that we're working on right now, though, is to roll up all of these 50 plans and so that we can actually answer your question, what is the status of the nation's wildlife? We have more species than some of the states do, but that's due primarily to the fact that we included invertebrates, and a lot of the states did not have sufficient information to actually look at invertebrate populations.
Consider yourself a wildlife enthusiast or conservationist. I'm just curious what led to your interest in this group.
Sure. As I said a few minutes ago, the importance to me of making sure that we preserve our Virginia heritage and outdoor heritage for our young people, for our children and everyone else's children. And that was instilled in me from an early age. I grew up hunting and fishing and enjoying the outdoors and working outdoors with my family and my grandparents. So from the very beginning, that was important to me. I don't know that I was a conservationist before I realized that I was a conservationist, and I believe a lot of folks are that way. You know, the hunting community and the fishing community as a whole were conservationists before that became popular. I mean, these are the same people that were setting aside land and easements and whatever you want to call it, food plots, that today a lot of folks are interested in. So our hunting community, our fishing community are truly wildlife enthusiasts. And we welcome the fact that now that definition is even broader. We're very pleased to realize that people who like to canoe and kayak and birdwatch and enjoy the trails, they're every bit of that community as the traditional hunting and fishing community is. So,
is there also a potential impact, though, on hunters and fishermen?
Well,
if the situation doesn't get better?
Well, absolutely. Now, most of our populations of animals that are hunted or fished for are in pretty good shape. And the reason they're in shape is because we've had funding for many years to address their needs. And we now need to develop the capacity to do that for other wildlife. But the common denominator in all this is habitat. And if we don't have the habitat to support, these species of wildlife, then all will suffer eventually. And that's what we've got to work towards, to try to make sure that we've got adequate types of habitat to support the vast array of species that we have in the state.
This isn't being called a crisis, is it? And what determines a crisis, I guess? Well,
I wouldn't call it a crisis, but I'd certainly say that there's enough concern that we're headed that way if we don't turn it around. And you need to kind of take it in the context of history. Wildlife agencies developed around the turn of the last century because there was a wildlife crisis. And we're headed that way now with the way that we're using land in this Commonwealth and in this country. And if we don't make the changes that John referred to earlier, if we don't start making some of those changes now, we will be in crisis again. And the crisis that we would be in would be a much more difficult crisis than Teddy Roosevelt and Guilford Pinchot and John Muir faced.
Interesting. And what kind of conservation programs are already in place?
Well, there's a variety of programs in place. Of course, we have programs that manage lands and properties to support wildlife.